Welcome to the RealTea podcast, brought to you by Tennessee REALTORS and sponsored by Rule First, helping you live closer to what matters. I'm your host, Angela Shields. This podcast is created for Tennessee REALTORS to get the tea on all things real estate in Tennessee. We'll bring you engaging conversations with esteemed guests in the real estate industry and cover a wide array of topics, including current events, governmental affairs, education, and legal updates. All right. We are very honored today to have a special guest with us, Randall Thomas, who is the owner of Appraisal Concepts and who was the 2013 president of Tennessee REALTORS. You have so many more accolades that we could sit here and go over. Such a wealth of knowledge, and I want to thank you for agreeing to join us today.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate you asking me.
Well, we have a lot to talk about because appraisals are a huge part of the real estate industry. Before we get there, though, it is a tradition now that we ask this one question to kick us off. We are called the RealTea podcast, and so I like to ask every guest what they prefer in their teacup.
Black coffee.
Black coffee seems to be the number one answer. I think we almost should change the name of our podcast to something else, John. Yeah. It's a big answer for everybody.
Yeah. I drink iced tea, but I couldn't tell you the last time I had a cup of hot tea.
Well, you could put iced tea in a teacup. That's okay.
Okay. I'll still go with black coffee.
Most people do, so that's good. That's good. All right, so we're going to talk about appraisals today because there's a lot of conversation around appraisals.
Yep.
And has been for many, many years now, I would say. So let's just start off and talk about the whole process, and in a nutshell, let you kind of explain what the process of an appraisal is.
Alrighty. Well, generally with the realtors, we're going to be talking about appraisals for mortgage lending, but there's appraisals for lots of other things. But in mortgage lending, as most of realtors know, now the lending institution has to go through a third party to contact the appraiser so that there's no direct contact, supposedly, between the appraiser and the lending institution. So you go through a third party, which is called an AMC, and they contact us. They contact an appraiser to do the appraisal after the realtor has a binding agreement on it, and they'll send us a copy of that binding agreement, and then we'll make arrangements to go out and do the physical inspection of the house. 99% of the times, and I'll qualify something by saying I don't do VA appraisals, so I know very little about them. But 99% of the time, they do require that we physically go out and look at the property inside and out, take photographs outside and in, and then report back what we have seen, what we have experienced, and what we saw at the residence. And that, unfortunately for the appraiser, includes the good, the bad, and the ugly. So there's a lot of things that sell that have a hard time appraising. But for the general part, I think most things do not have a hard time appraising. But that's kind of what we do.
So you made me think of a couple of different things. So one, you mentioned your experience with VA. So appraisers, much like a realtor, they may specialize in particular areas, whether it be commercial, residential, or what have you. Is that correct?
To a degree, there's 4 different licensings of appraisers, where there's one of real estate agent. But as far as the VA, Veterans Administration has a panel of appraisers that they select, and they only use X number of appraisers for the population. So in East Tennessee, where I am, there's about 60 appraisers, probably cover about 19 counties. But there's only a handful of VA because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and other kinds of loans are just more popular than VA. So they have a limited, I think of the 60 up here, I think there's about 5 up here that do VA appraisals.
Oh, wow. And then just to make sure everybody is clear, the education that you go through to maintain and keep your license, you have to do that just like realtors do, correct?
Yeah, only we have 28. We have to do 28 hours every 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And like a realtor or like a real estate agent or realtors, I'll say, we have a code of ethics that we have to have every 2 years, which is called USPAP, which is Uniform Standards of Professional Practice. So we have to have that course, and that's a 7-hour course, and then you have to have 3 additional 7-hour courses for 28 hours total every 2 years.
And then one thing I'm going to clear up real quick, because I get questions sometimes about our appraisers realtors, and the answer is yes, because we do have it in the bylaws that if you join the association, you are a realtor, and obviously you are, because you were president of not only the local but the state association as well. You're very active at the National Association of Realtors.
But I've had my real estate license. Yes. I'm going to give my age away, since 1978. So I've had a real estate license. I just don't do anything in real estate. But I've had a real estate license since 1978. But yeah, we have 4 different calibers of or licensing steps in appraisers.
Yeah, I think that is so fascinating. So let's talk about the things that really impact an appraisal, things like the location, the condition, and all of the things that you're looking at. Okay.
Probably in the current market that we're in, the 2 biggest things that have kind of floated to the top are quality and condition. But again, location is always one of the most important things. But to piggyback what you just said there about one of the most important things, and it's things that people don't realize, and one of the greatest influences of value on real estate, or let's put it this way, on your real estate, is how your neighbors choose to live. And so lenders don't want to loan $500,000 on a house that's in a $200,000 neighborhood. So we have to provide a street scene picture to show that this house fits into the neighborhood. We got $500,000 house here and a $600 there and a $400 here, so my house fits okay. But they don't want to loan big time money on a property when it's in a lesser neighborhood. So that's one of the big things that we go on. But the quality and condition right now are probably the 2 biggest things. And the other thing always, and I'm not talking about a cash purchase, but always on a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and that's health and safety. And I've tried to instill in realtors here, when you have a set of steps and you move 24 inches or 3 steps, whichever comes first, you have to have a handrail. And there's a lot of houses where you leave the kitchen or you leave the main level and you go down into the basement, and there's just a set of steps and there's not a handrail at all. And so that's going to get dinged by an appraiser that you need to put up a handrail.
Oh, wow.
So if you move 3, and we have a lot of areas here, and it's pretty common, you have a big porch out front that's maybe 3 or 4 feet off the ground, and we'll be telling people you have to put a handrail around it, and they'll say, well, I've lived here for 20 years, never had to have one. And I hate to tell you, I appreciate that, but with lending requirements, you're going to have one in certain aspects for like FHA especially. FHA is going to require that every time. A cash buyer or Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac don't require it all the time. But if I do FHAs, and FHA will require that you have to have a handrail if anything is 24 inches off the ground or more.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. What about other market trends? Is there anything that kind of ebbs and flows, interest rates or anything like that?
Well, interest rates have caused the market to slow, I can tell you that, as it keeps going up. And in Tennessee, we're very fortunate because we have a lot of people coming here from other states where they're selling their houses and they're coming here and paying cash. And that's wonderful for realtors, and it's wonderful for appraisers, because I do a lot of appraisals in cash loans or in cash purchases. But it's terrible for local people because local people can't do that. They can't sell that kind of house and double their money and then come back here and buy the same kind of house and pay more than they should for it and still have cash left in their pocket. But that's a common thing. The other thing is our environment's a big deal right now. I don't do any what's called green appraisals, but solar panels are becoming a bigger thing. When you go outside of the house and I would say sniff around, but just when you breathe, there are certain areas in East Tennessee that are not as pleasant as other areas, and it's really hard on an appraisal to put that down and make an adjustment. But in the environment's always going to be part of it. And then, of course, in our area, well, in every area in Tennessee, there are a lot of areas that were never in flood zones that have flooded now. So flood maps will change in 2025. And we have to, as an appraiser, we have a program that pulls up flood maps, but it pulls up flood maps in a generalized area. So if you live in XYZ subdivision, it may pull up your subdivision and say the subdivision is not in a flood zone, but it doesn't pull up your specific piece of property. And your individual house could be in a flood zone, even though the subdivision is not. So that's critical on our part, is trying to get that right, especially with flood insurance premiums now.
Right. I know we were just having that conversation before we went into our podcast about floods, and it brings up in my mind that you have so many other natural disasters, whether it's floods, tornadoes, fires, and I can only imagine as an appraiser coming in after something like that has to be hard.
It does. It's very difficult because it's unique and it's not something that we do all the time. I had several years ago, I had to do an appraisal on a piece of property that had burned, and the only thing that I had was photographs, and I got to measure a foundation that was still there, and that was it. And I had to do an appraisal on the house as to what it would have been worth the day before it was totally destroyed. Wow. And so that happens. Like you said before the broadcast, too frequently now, it seems like. Yes.
Oh, and the emotional toll on having to come in after somebody's lost all of that and responsible for that.
That's part of the psychology of being an appraiser.
Yeah. Oh, well, talking about unique situations, let's go away from the disasters, but talk about some of the unique. Obviously, don't give away the property, but talk about some of the unique situations you've had to be in where you're asked to appraise something that you just kind of scratch your head at and just say, I can't believe I'm having to do this.
That seems to be more common than it used to be. Had to do a roundhouse one time.
Oh my goodness.
And one of the things for an appraisal is you have to find at least 3 comparables. Well, there is none hardly. So that happens. And then I had to do a house, which is incredibly nice in our area. And in our area, when you're talking about a $4 or $5 million house, you're talking about a whopper. And I did one $4.2 million not long ago. And finding comparables is almost impossible. And then I've done some where, and even in real estate law, you don't have to disclose, but I've done several where people have either been killed or died in the house. And I just did one the other day, in fact. And that's a little different. I've done some where a lady told me she had a ghost.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, said she had a ghost. And the only thing I can tell you is I went between 2 rooms and there was not a door. There was just a walkway. And in the other room, it was about 20 degrees colder. And I have no idea why. And she said, "Oh, this is where my Confederate soldier lives." And I thought, I didn't see him, I didn't see him. But I just said, okay, but it was kind of different. So then I always share the story when you pull up to a house and the homeowner comes running out to the car to greet you. you know that something's wrong because, the back roof is missing or the kitchen floor is not there or something. And so one point in time, this happened to me, and a guy came out and he said, Mr. Thomas, I just want to tell you something. He said, I have a pet tarantula, and I was feeding her this morning, and she got out, and I don't know where she is.
Oh, my goodness.
And I thought, holy mackerel. So I
hope you didn't find it.
I went through the house and did the appraisal, and I could feel a million things crawling on me, but I never did see the thing. and I'll tell you, I didn't spend a whole lot of time in the house either.
Oh,
I just wanted to get out. Yeah. Oh. But there's always things that the kitchen floors are real soft because a lot of water has rotted things. And when you're meeting a seller, they're always going to tell you the absolute best things about the house. I spent this much money on this, or well, this is brand new, or that's brand new. And I guess the term or the definition for brand new covers a pretty wide span, because when I kind of pin them down, you're brand new. Now explain that to them. Well, we replaced it 6 years ago. And to me, brand new means you got it last week or something.
Right.
But, it'll say 6 years ago. And I'll think, okay, so it's not really brand new. But there's a lot of things you run into that when you see, I know that I need to probably ask or request somebody else in another expertise in their profession, like a roofer. There's times when we look at a roof and you think we're supposed to be able to say a roof has a minimum of 2 years worth of life left on it. And, that really comes into question sometimes, because you think, does it have 5 years? Does it have 2 years? If it were me, I'd replace it, but I'm not going to say that, where it might kill the deal. Same thing with windows. Windows are a big deal. And when we're talking about FHA, that they still think for some reason all of us eat chip and paint. So if anything has chipping paint on the windows or anywhere, you have to, for an FHA, you have to request that paint be scraped and repainted. So those are just a few of the things.
Very interesting. So while you're on the subject of the official, what things are the definition of things or how things should be, talk about bedrooms. Some people have bedrooms that they call bedrooms, but maybe they aren't.
Okay, and I'll agree with that. There's a lot of discussion as to two things that realtors always ask me about: what constitutes a bedroom and what's a basement. And a bedroom has to have, according to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and I have the letter from FHA, the bedroom has to have three things. It has to have a minimum of 73 square feet, which basically is 7 by 10. That's a good sized walk-in closet. That's about it. But it has to have 73 square feet. And then it has to have two means of escape. So if you have a bedroom just has a door and the door is on fire, you have no way to get out of that room. It's not a bedroom. Okay. So you can use a window, or you can use another door. For example, like in a Jack and Jill setup, if you're in bedroom A and the door is on fire, you can go through the bathroom and go out bedroom B.
Okay.
And so that constitutes a bedroom, and that room really doesn't have to have a window because it has two means of escape. Okay. The other thing it has to have is the expectancy of privacy. And so you can't put a bed in the middle of the living room and say, okay, I got a 4-bedroom house now instead of a 3-bedroom. And the other thing about that is you cannot go through a bedroom to get to a bedroom. So if the only means to get to bedroom B is to go through bedroom A, then bedroom A is not a bedroom. So it has to have 73 square feet, two means of escape, and the expectancy of privacy. And it doesn't matter whether it's on the main level, second level, or in the basement. Those criteria hold true for a bedroom. So
I always heard it had to have a closet. So that's not
no.
true.
No. We used to preach that all the time. Oh, a bedroom has to have a closet. Even Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA say no, it doesn't have to have one. And the other thing I would say is this, and that is the International Residential Building Code is what in Tennessee has adopted that. along with many other states, makes no mention whatsoever that a bedroom has to have a closet. Because, you know as well as I do, years ago in old houses, they used a piece of furniture for a closet.
Yes.
And so the market may expect a room to have a closet, but it does not have to have a closet, no.
Okay, good to know. Rule First not only lends rule, but lives rule too. And as a cooperative, they can offer products and services other lenders aren't able to. From construction to land loans to financing homes in the country, they'll walk you through the process to make your rule dreams a reality. And because community matters, they're committed to investing in the communities they're a part of. Learn how you can get closer to what matters at rulefirst.com. Rule First is a registered trademark of Farm Credit Mid-America, NMLS 407249. Equal housing lender, loans subject to approval and eligibility.
Now, let me talk to you a little bit about basements.
Yes,
because our part of the country has lots of basements. And the new law, the way appraisers have to measure things, is called the ANSI system. And if in that lower level, if any part of that lower level has earth up against it, then the entire level is basement. And how that's qualified is from the front door up is above grade, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 8 floors. But from the front door down is a basement. And a lot of people have finished basements, which are every bit, when you're in the house, are every bit as nice as the main level. And there's no problem with that. But understand, it's still a basement. It's valued differently. It's looked at differently. But realtors say all the time, "Oh, so I don't get any value from my finished basement." That's 100% incorrect. You do get value. It's just a different kind of a different type of value. And on the appraisal, it shows up in a different place. So, for example, if you take, in our area, we have houses called split foyers. Mm-hmm. If you have a split foyer and you have 3 bedrooms on the main level with 2 baths, and then you have a den with a bathroom on the lower level or the basement, on the appraisal, in the numbers, it's going to show up that you have 2 bathrooms, even though the house has 3. But down below where the numbers are in the verbiage, it's then going to say, and there's an additional full 3rd bathroom on the basement level. So basements and bedrooms are a unique creature within themselves, especially in our area. And then what is finished, I'm going to say that has a whole lot to do with the appraiser and how or what you consider to be finished. I've been in some basements that are finished, like I say, every bit as nice as the upstairs, sheetrock, carpet, hardwood, whatever. But then there's some where you have a room where it's all sheetrock and there's carpet, but there's no ceiling in it. You're still looking at the trusses or the joists from, and then the question arises, is that finished or is it not finished? And a lot of that's going to be up to the appraiser to say, well, you're living there, you can utilize that. And that's kind of an appraiser's call. There's nothing that's written or cut in stone in that for us.
What about things that are on the outside of the house, swimming pools, detached garages? I've seen some people that put in pickleball courts, anything like that. Okay.
A lot of that, well, let's say this first. A swimming pool has to be built in. Mm-hmm. Okay. If it's above ground, and it's got a real nice deck around it and everything, and I see them all the time, there's no value there. Lenders consider that to be personal property. Built-in swimming pools are given very little value in our part of the country. If I was appraising in Miami, where every house has a built-in swimming pool, if you didn't have one, I might make a deduction. But in our area, most of the time, a swimming pool is considered to be a super adequacy, and it's something that's really nice, and it's wonderful for a sales feature, but it's not going to add a lot of value to it. And then we have a lot of people who have these little storage barns that they put in the backyard. And I have had people say, I paid $3,000 for that. And by the manner of attachment to the earth depends on whether that building has any value at all. And if it's on a permanent foundation, then it'll have value. But if it's just sitting out there on a couple block, and that's what 90% of ours are, and people are using them where they put the lawnmower and stuff in, then it has no value. It's wonderful for selling, but it has no value on an appraisal.
Makes sense. So, changing the subject just a little bit, when it comes to contingencies on contracts, does that have any impact on the appraisal for the mortgage?
Well, I guess it depends on what the contingency is. If it's because you have to sell your house in another town, then no, it doesn't have anything. If it's contingent upon the seller doing something major to the house, then yeah, it would. And in some instances, it's contingent on the potential buyer doing something to the house that they don't own yet. And I discourage that. Mm-hmm. But they can't get the seller, like it's an estate, and the seller is just selling mom and dad's house, and the sellers live out of state, but the buyer comes in and they say, gee, I want to convert the carport to a garage. That contingency. So it would depend upon the contingency, whether it has any impact or anything. And then I would like to talk to you on a sales contract about sales concessions. Okay. And sales concessions is anything that helps the buyer obtain the loan or purchase the property. It has nothing to do with repairs. So I go through your house and you need chip and paint that has to be cleared up. You got vinyl in the bathroom that needs to be replaced. And you got a hot water heater that needs to be replaced. And that's going to probably be, let's just pick a number and say $4,000. That is not a sales concession. That has nothing to do with you getting a loan. It has to do with repairing the house to make it livable. So sales concessions are an interesting thing, but basically it's the seller making some kind of financial contribution to the buyer in order for the buyer to be able to obtain their loan and or that house.
Right. Okay. And another thing I'll throw out there to you is I know the MLS information, the multiple listing service information, is very important to appraisers. And I know that there are times where people are putting things in quickly. Talk about how important it is to have accurate information for an appraiser.
It's just absolutely critical. Because most appraisers get 100% of their information from MLS. I have a tremendous researcher. I've been married to her for 48 years. But we'll dig around and find property that went from, Joe Blow to Mike Smith, and there's not a realtor involved. And that house is a legitimate sale, but it never shows up in MLS. So that's a good comp, as long as we can verify things. So verification for an appraiser is everything. When you look at MLS sheets and some of the things that are on there, and just once I'd like to see a realtor where it has condition, them say this house sucks. It's always excellent or very good. I'm just thinking it can't be. But anyway, if you get the information right up front, because the appraiser is going to use that information on your sale today is my comparable tomorrow. Right. So the data that you put in there, that if I don't go back and verify it, may or may not be correct. And in our area, we have a lot of Cape Cod houses, and the tax office will have 1,000 square feet on the main level and 1,000 square feet on the second level. Well, in a Cape Cod, that's impossible. The second level is not going to be as many square feet, but we'll have realtors who put 1,000 square feet on the main thousand. So I'll have a 2,000 square foot house for a comparable. But when I do my research, I've come to find out it's only got 1,610 square feet instead of 2,000. So I would ask, that you make sure that you put as much correct data that you can, and don't put confusing data. I had one not long ago, and I've mentioned it to several people, and it said garage 0, number 0, square foot 0, and then in the verbiage it said the extra key in the lockbox is for the garage. And I thought, wait a minute, the garage has no square feet. There's no garage. How's the key for the garage? But it was, realtor just didn't read what they were writing, but when you looked at it, it looked like I had a house that had no garage. So just put in things that are correct. As far as age, I can verify that real simply at the courthouse. A lot of things I can verify. But if you've been completely through the house as the listing agent, there's probably things that you know that you may or may not want to put on a listing, but that I would be helpful to know. It would be helpful for me to know. So a lot of times I'll just pick up the phone and call the realtor. Some of them are just totally willing to help you, and they'll spill their guts about everything that they saw wrong and right, and that's wonderful for me. But then other times you can't get a hold of them, and you just have to go with what's in MLS. So, yeah, I would encourage realtors to get down on that MLS, the true and the factual information, as much true and factual information as you can.
Well, it sounds like their sale could end up being the comp that they need for their next sale.
Exactly.
So it makes sense to have the accurate information in there.
You're 100% correct. That's exactly right.
Right. Is there a difference between the appraisal value and the market value?
Well, I'm going to say yes and no. The market value is what market value has some wishful thinking in it. Market value is what this property should sell for under normal circumstances without anybody having to sell or being under duress, what it should sell for in this market. And then the appraised value is going to be the value that is backed up by fact. These facts have occurred, and this is what the appraiser has come up with based on the facts that have already happened. And I teach a class, and I always explain to people, if you look right here, and this is today, the appraisal deals 100% with what has happened. And I can't tell you anything what's going to happen, but I can tell you what has happened. And that's what we have to deal with, is what has occurred. So the appraised value is based on facts that have occurred, and market value is what it should bring, whether it does or whether it doesn't, what it should bring without any kind of outside stimulus being involved.
That's a great way to explain it. So, that leads me to, you mentioned earlier about that you have a different code of ethics through the appraisers. What are, just in a nutshell, what are some of the things it covers?
The biggest thing it covers right now is bias. You're appraising the property, not the people. So it doesn't matter to me who owns the house or who's buying the house. I'm doing an appraisal on the house. That's a big deal right now in the appraisal business, is biased, and they have gotten on appraisers because we have, I'll say we as appraisers in general, have appraised properties in areas lower than they should be, or in an area higher than it should be, just because it's an affluent area and you expect it to be high. And the other thing that I would tell you would be, there's never been an appraisal cut in stone. So when I say the house is worth $300,000, you may be fortunate enough to get $325,000 out of it, but you also may have to take $290,000. So the bank wants a point of value. I would love for the appraisals in the business to be able to say, okay, it's worth between $290,000 and $310,000. That would make me feel a whole lot better.
A range.
A range, but they're never going to do that.
Yeah. That's it's nice to hear that when you say that there's code of ethics. I know, again, you have code of ethics because of being a realtor, but it's nice to hear that. And when you say that there was the bias, you're meaning across the nation, not just in your area or here in Tennessee. It's
across the nation. We see very little of that in Tennessee. I see very little of that in East Tennessee, especially. But I'm just talking about across the nation as a whole. Yeah.
Right. And then kind of where the time flies in these podcasts. So we're kind of coming to the end of our time. But as we get there, what advice do you have for new realtors when they come into the business and they're understanding how the appraisals work and working with appraisers? What advice would you give to them?
Okay, my first thing I would say is find a local appraiser who is reputable get to know them, and call them and talk to them. Karen Randolph used to call me almost every week. She'd say, I got a question for you. And she'd say, I got an agent who's going to call you. And these people would call and say, my broker told me to call you. You could help me with this. Get to know an appraiser, and ping some things off of them every once in a while. And then don't be afraid to recommend that appraiser to people who are like cash buyers or people who are trying to settle an estate or things like that. But the other thing I would say is make sure you get your data straight, you get your data clear, and you get it accurate when you're coming into the business. And the other thing is the appraisers are going to differ just because of our personalities. I'm not much on doing old houses, historic houses. So there's times when I'll say, just once you get somebody else to do that, they're going to give you a little better look at it than I do. But I would just recommend to young people to get or people coming in to get their data straight from the get-go, get to know an appraiser, get to understand an appraiser. There are classes out there that'll teach you what an appraisal is. As a realtor, you're not expected to know everything about the appraisal industry, but you should be able to sit down with a client and say, well, this is the reason why he has come up with this value. And the other thing I would tell you would be this. Years ago, when I first started, you were a very little girl, Angela. There used to be another lady here in our area, and she's very well-known, very well respected realtor. She's now retired. But whenever I got an appraisal assignment that came from her as the realtor, she would send me, so the house is selling at $500,000. She would send me 3 or 4 sales, 525, 550, 540, and then she'd send me some 450, 475, so that I could never come back to her and say, well, I can't find anything that'll help me get the value up to your sales price, because she would give me some above and some below. And did she do my work for me? To some degree, yes. But the other thing that from a realtor's point is, as an appraiser, I'm going to get paid whether it sells, whether it closes, or whether it doesn't close. As a realtor, you're not. So if you want to do a little bit of work for me and help me do my work so that I can understand and help you get this closed, that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. And you can, I know there's some appraisers that don't want you to do that. For me, you can give me all the paperwork you want, because I can always throw it away. But if I don't have it, I don't know about it. So that's what I would tell. But I would certainly suggest to a young newbie getting into the business, find an appraiser that you can kind of pick their brain a little bit, and then pick their brain years down the road. Karen Randolph and I have known, we knew each other for years, and she would still call me. So
she was awesome.
Yeah.
That is great advice. What do you think that the realtor should be making sure that their clients understand about appraisals? You were talking about the clients, but what is the key thing that they should understand about appraisals?
Okay, number one, I guess, is when we come into your house, we're not looking at personal items. We're not looking if the bed was made. I hear people, I haven't had a chance to make the bed. I haven't had a chance to run the vacuum cleaner. I don't care. I'm looking at the house. So don't worry about your personal things. There's a lot of, when I take interior photographs now, there's a lot of personal things that we either have to redact out of the photograph or take another. I usually take 2 in every room so that if I see something, I can choose the other picture. But don't be afraid of the appraisal. I've gone in properties and I've seen people shaking when I was there doing the appraisal. And I thought, I'm not going to kill you. I'm just looking at the house. But don't be afraid of that. Clean up around the house, because I have to take exterior photographs. I've had people say, well, I got about 4 or 5 junk cars in the yard. And I said, well, you might want to move 3 of them. It just makes a better picture. And if a picture says 1,000 words, I'm putting about 20 some pictures in the appraisal. So that's pretty much language. Inform the appraiser if you have a man-eating dog. I've been greeted several times, been bitten 3 times in 40 years, but
at least it wasn't by the spider.
Not by a spider, no. And it always makes me feel better. I don't know that it has any influence on value or not, but it always makes me feel better that when you go in a house and they've been boiling like a potpourri on the stove, or they have candles or something, it just makes you feel better about the house instead of going in where they've had, tons of animals in the house and you think, I just can't wait to get out of this where I can get me some fresh air. Mm-hmm. But those are the kind of things that I would tell people about. And don't from a client's point of view, don't try to hide. I mean, don't lie to me. Golly bum. When you lie to me, you're in trouble right off the bat. So especially when I find out about it and I think, okay, what else have they lied to me about? So that would be the one, just clean the house up, make sure the house is presentable for the appraiser to show up.
Sounds like great advice. So my last question, you mentioned that you are an educator. We've had you teach the appraisal class for us several times. And just to our listeners out there, if you ever have an opportunity to take one of Randy's classes, you should. He is awesome. We get tons of accolades after his class.
Yeah.
If you were teaching a class, what have we not discussed today that you would make sure you would bring up that everyone should know about, or just last words of wisdom here?
Okay. I guess the thing I would say is, from a realtor's point of view, please understand that I'm not in the business to rubber stamp your deal, but I'm also not in the business to kill your deal. Okay, I just tell people I'm going to be fair and honest. It is what it is, and if it gets to within a reasonable range of your sales price, $3,000 or $4,000, $2,000 or $3,000, I'm going to make it work, because the truth of the matter is we're not that exact. We're not that good. On a $525,000 house, if I appraise it for $520,000, that's ridiculous. So. We're not in the business to rubber stamp your deal, but I'm certainly not in the business to kill it either.
That is awesome. Randy, I think we could go on for another hour or more, so we may have to do a part 2 one of these days.
Okay.
But this is fantastic information. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we will wrap up today. But like I said, look for me to call on you again.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you all for joining us today on the RealTea podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and colleagues. Then visit tnrealtors.com to submit your questions and topics for future episodes of the RealTea podcast. Thanks for listening.